Good afternoon to one and all present here. I'm pleased to start off this event. I'm Sanika Mehta, the editor-in-chief of Economics of the Contrarian, and I'm going to start off by talking about the economics department of Jai Hind College. So the economics department of Jai Hind College literally goes back to 1948, the time when the college was established, and it has come a long way. The department offers diversified opportunities for students, online, offline alike. It has three tangents, which include Autonomics, the annual business and economics fest of Jai Hind College, which stands out as the first online fest when the pandemic hit. The Economic Association, which brings together the students of economics to give them exposure and knowledge, and the Contrarian, which started off as an annual magazine and is now a publication managing to come up with pieces of diversified content on a daily basis. As times have progressed, so have the Department of Economics and everything with it. This year, we pulled off the eighth edition of Autonomics. Economic Association came up with numerous webinars, and the Contrarian introduced masterclasses, its flagship event, and published over 250 pieces of content. This year, the Department of Economics got bigger and better, and with the spirit, it will continue doing so. I would now like to hand over to Manna to introduce and open the annual economics symposium.
Thank you, Sanika. Starting with what the economics department envisions to bring forth for its students, we would like to present to you the last and the landmark event of this academic year, the annual economics symposium 2022. The recent times have been no less than a roller coaster ride. Although the ride has been dynamic, it has also created a sense of monotony for some and chaos for all. With succeeding years filled with disruptions and adaptation, the theme we chose for this year's annual economic symposium is gaining momentum with change. Change is the only constant. It is not always immediate and usually occurs after the dissemination of new ideas. Adhering to the theme, the events for this year are curated to push the students to explore, unlearn a few traditional methods, and go beyond their boundaries. With this, I, Manna Chima, the General Secretary of the Economics Association 2021-22, declare the annual Economic Symposium open. For our first event, the annual research paper competition, I would like to hand over to Ria and Gorangi.
Hi everyone, I, Riya Chanani, along with Gaurangi Bhardwaj, will be very excited to welcome you as hosts for our very first event, which is research paper competition. Formulating a policy is a complex process of defining the problem, assessing the alternative policies, adopting a suitable policy, and monitoring it once implemented. Since every policy introduced has tremendous social, economic, and political implications, it is crucial to choose the ideal course of action. Policy analysis is concerned primarily with the policy alternatives that are expected to produce novel solutions. We are proud to announce the theme for this year's annual research competition as policy analysis. In 2022, education, health, and poverty were visibly three important areas that required stability and growth. Keeping this in mind, the research papers also undertook these core sectors while writing their policy analysis. Now I will pass over to Gaurangi to explain the rules and conduct for the event.
Thank you, Ria. So this event will take place in two rounds. Round one consisted of the pre-submission of the research papers, wherein participants brainstormed a specific policy and analyzed it. Today, we are all here for round two of the research paper competition. The theme and issues covered in the research papers are briefly described by a presentation by each of the teams. I would now like to highlight the judging criteria. So the participants will be judged on the basis of content and structure of the paper, issue undertook and their analysis, overall presentation, speech and impact, and the authenticity of the data and the sources. To judge this event, we have with us today Ms. Bhargavi Zaveri. Ma'am is a researcher and is currently pursuing a doctorate degree at the National University of Singapore. Her core research interests are in the fields of financial regulation, bankruptcy, regulatory governance, and the land market. She has previously held research position at the Harvard Law School, the National Institute of Public Finance and Policy, New Delhi, and the Indira Gandhi Institute of Development Research. She is a lawyer by training and was associated with a law firm prior to taking up the full-time policy research and academia. Welcome, ma'am.
Thanks for having me here, Gaurangi, Priya, Manat. It's a pleasure.
I would now like to go over the code of conduct for today's event. So each team will have 15 minutes to present, followed by a question-answer round by the judge towards the end of the presentation. Now with this, we are very excited to begin our first presentation for the day. I call upon Isha and Disha for their presentation. All the best, guys. Over to you.
Can you present the screen, Jia?
Yes, can you see? Is it visible now?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, I'll start the time. You may begin now. Disha, you might be on mute. We are not able to hear you.
Now can you? Am I audible now?
Yeah, you are now. Yeah.
Let's start again. So good afternoon, everyone, one and all present here. So I am Ms. Disha Bansuriya, and along with me, Isha Seth, are going to talk about the research paper that is gaining momentum with the change about the policy analysis. So the field that got our attention is education. Can you change the slide? So the topic that we specifically took is the graded autonomy in the new education policy of 2020 and its impact on the higher education system in Mumbai. So I would like Isha to continue.
The Indian government approved a National Education Policy or NEP 2020 on 29 July, making way for large-scale transformational reforms, including restructuring the higher education system into three main categories. First, a degree awarding institution. Second, greater institutional autonomy. And third, a new research foundation and renewed commitment to allow foreign universities into India as a part of an internationalization drive. Autonomy is associated with dynamism and freedom, and an institution may be required to adapt its core structure and content to meet market demands. However, the debate over autonomy in Indian higher education cannot be limited to intellectual circles. The concept of university autonomy is defined as an institution's ability to operate its operation without interference or direction from any level of government.
So now getting to know what the actual background of the graded autonomy in India is. So this concept of university autonomy is not a very recent topic. It has been debated for over last 4 decades. The Gajendra Gadkar Committee report of 1971 states that the concept of university autonomy is often misunderstood. It is neither a legal concept nor it is a constitutional concept. So this concept does not question how in a democratic society like ours, the legislatures are ultimately sovereign and have a right to discuss and determine the question of policy relating to education, including the higher education. It is purely an ethical concept and an academic concept.
Next slide, please. Next slide. Now, let us talk about the need why government highlighted graded autonomy in New Education Policy 2020. Firstly, the current systems of regulation-based autonomy have ignored the recent demographic and compositional shifts in education. Currently, the number of private institutions is almost twice that of government institutions, yet the model of governance has been relatively slow to change. Secondly, wherever the central government has taken incremental steps, their implementation at state level has been tardy and one of inaction. Thirdly, our understanding of autonomy does not always consider the interconnection across the related concepts like academic, managerial, administrative, and financial dimensions. Now, I would like Disha to continue.
Next slide, please. So the three main objectives that we ponder upon our research paper. The first is the impact of the new education policy of 2020 on the current education system of our country. The second is the aim is to see that whether the autonomy contributes to the development of the curriculum and its practical application on the real world. The third is to see whether the autonomy adds value to the degree, allowing them to find better jobs, placements, and also help them to stand confidently in the global market. Next slide, please.
Now let us talk about the impact of new education policy, particularly on graded autonomy. The autonomy will majorly impact the two main aspects, that are curriculum and overall development of the student. Now let us discuss each of them in detail. Next slide, please. Now let us talk about curriculum. The autonomy will help institutions to pre-locate autonomy to departments and faculty members to work in multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, and cross-disciplinary environments to offer educational programs in new education policy 2020. The trained education leaders and faculty members will help students to develop their capacity to work in a multidisciplinary team. The team teaching concept will be practiced at faculty and at student level. Autonomy and supportive classroom are those in which students see their perspectives valued, have opportunities to share their thoughts and feelings, and are encouraged to make choices and exercise self-initiative in learning activities. Next slide, please. We conducted a survey of the students residing in Mumbai, wherein we can see that more than 50% of respondents have a viewpoint that if autonomy is granted to higher education institutions, they will be designing the outcome-based curriculum for all the programs. Next slide, please.
So now talking about the second aspect that we majorly look is the overall development of the students. So in today's competitive marketplace, there is a huge demand for the proficient technical.
Somebody mute it from your device. It's echoing. Yeah, okay. Rachel has left. Okay, Soumya, let's go.
Can I continue?
Yeah.
So the demand for proficient technical and management professionals. So the practical training and the curriculum meticulously framed to meet the requirements of the job market that are imparted to the students to make them readily employable. Also, the overall syllabus is framed in such a way that the students get to study more than 2 labs in a semester, which in turn helps them to gain more practical knowledge, which is very required in the real world. In addition to this, hands-on the projects, which are an important part of the curriculum, plays a vital role in making students employment ready. The students are provided with the multiple opportunities to intern at various industries, MNCs, research and development laboratories during their vacation time to groom them for the industry that they are going to step in. The autonomy also promotes industrial and societal research projects in a collaborative manner to solve the complex problems, add value, and continually improve the effectiveness, efficiency, and productivity. The autonomy undertake research studies to improve their own systems, processes, and outcomes. Next slide, please. So the primary data that we collected shows that is more than 50% of the respondents believe that autonomy leads to rise in the productivity level, which in turn leads to the engagement of the well-trained people in the public as well as private sectors. Report says, one of the reports says that the aim to increase the gross enrollment ratio, that is the GER, in higher education, including the vocational education, from 26.3%, that is of 2018, to 50% by 2035. Also, some 35 billion new seats will be added to the higher education institutions. Open and distance learning will be expanded to play a significant role in increasing the GER, that is the gross enrollment ratio, which in turn will definitely help to increase the overall development of the students. Next slide.
Now we will be talking about few suggestions that will help to improve the autonomy in new education policy. First is curriculum transformation. The curriculum must be progressive in order to instill dynamism. Students should be able to choose from variety of courses in the first year with the option to study whatever they want after first year. The emphasis of the course should be on projects rather than on tests to avoid stagnation. Hence, it will lead to innovation. Second is teachers can award grades and provide feedback to students in order to assist them to develop in other areas. One of the positive impact of COVID is that students as well as parents have got their hands on technology. Taking the advantage of this, students and parents can be notified of the findings by email or SMS alerts as soon as possible. It instills a great deal of trust in the ability to deliver interactive digital content. The third is to make procedure to go through some hoops of interviews and applications in order to determine whether or not the college or institution is ready to be granted for autonomy or not.
Next slide, please. So to add some more suggestions about what Isha said, the first will be to appoint a committee to keep a check on the substantial burden on the universities which they may receive due to the autonomy that has been granted to them, like to have to regulate their admissions, set curriculums, conduct examinations for the larger number of the undergraduate. The second will be to there could be two things that must be done in India's higher education system to be proactive that are desperately needed. First is to begin with make autonomous synonymous with transparency and accountability with the participation of all the stakeholders. The second is the methodical elimination of many of whom are viewed as breeding grounds, corruption, nepotism with the laws and regulatory organizations. Last but not the least, actively seek the help of others and participation of the high quality private sector institutions to expand their horizons, improve school quality, and as a result, increase the economic and social opportunities and India's knowledge. Next slide.
So, next slide, please. Yeah. So, hereby to conclude, since the corporate world is becoming far more competitive, education and learning models should be molded in a way to cater to the changing dynamics. Overall, autonomic learning strategies give students far more control over their education and thus their ability to develop skills needed to follow their passion. With the help of autonomy, students can set goals and work towards achieving them in a far better way. In the process, they can evaluate their performance and understand where they are lacking. Thank you.
Thank you, Group 1. Ma'am, question for the team.
So, thanks, Disha and Isha, for this presentation. I really enjoyed it. First, I'll just go with what I really liked about the presentation and about your essay. And then, I had some questions and, one of you could just help me understand this better. So I really like the topic. I think it's a very relevant topic. I really like the fact that you focused on one part of this topic, which is autonomy, right? I mean, the NEP is a huge document, but you chose the right thing. So I like that selection. It's very relevant. So congrats on that. I like the fact that you use the survey instrument to identify what are people's views on what they believe about autonomy, right? Now, okay, the gaps. All right. So when you are presenting a policy analysis, the first thing that you begin with is what is the problem that is trying to be, what is the problem that this policy attempts to resolve? Okay. Is the problem fees? Is the problem lack of quality of education? Is the problem, failure to give enough freedom to institutions to develop? What I thought was missing and what you could have done a better job at is describe the problem in 500 words, that the NEP tries to solve this problem. You could have focused on, that lack of autonomy actually means that all institutions are treated equally and all of them are rule bound in terms of what curriculum they can offer, etc. What does that do? What is the harm? The harm is that the consumer is harmed. Not every student wants the same kind of curriculum. Not every student will have the best learning outcomes with the standard, for example, Maharashtra board curriculum. or HSC curriculum, right? So why don't, the way we give consumers choice in selecting cars, in selecting food, in selecting, why don't we give consumers choice in selecting what kind of curriculum they want to learn, right? And when can that happen? When you allow institutions to develop their own kind of curriculum, depending on, and how will they learn? They will see the demand for it, right? You guys are economics students, you understand this better than me. If there is a demand for certain kind of curriculum, the institution, if it has autonomy, will be able to develop that kind of curriculum. So I think next time when you write a policy analysis, start with what is the problem, okay, that the policy is trying to solve. Now, I wanted to ask, why did you use a survey instrument to identify, why survey? Why not some other tool? What is the best way of identifying whether autonomy is a good thing or a bad thing?
So the autonomy has been implemented in the new education policy 2020, basically for the students that are going to study, right? So the survey mainly focused on the students that have been serving in studying in the higher education, that are in the degree colleges. So this will help us to know that is the other end of the world country willing to get the autonomy or not.
So you surveyed students who are not studying in autonomous institutions right now. Am I correct?
And who are studying also, so that we we get an idea that they want it or not.
Okay, so one thing is to say that they want it, but I think the questions you ask is more outcome oriented, which is that will autonomy lead to better curriculum, for example. I think those are the type of questions you asked, right?
Yeah. So we actually we had a range of questions that like 10 to 12. So the starting questions were like, will they want to, if they want autonomy, then only these questions will be answered, right? If they like autonomy, then only they can say that the impact of the autonomy is good or not. So that is the reason the first questions were autonomy is, and then the question.
Okay, so first of all, when you do a survey, you should write in your essay how many people responded. You know, it may well be that 10 people responded and you administer the questionnaire to, say, for example, 55 people, but only 7 people responded. And these responses are on the basis of 7 people's responses. That's number one. You have to describe the sample that responded. What is the average age group of the people who responded? See, the fact that these people, the survey respondents, are actually college students, I did not get that from the essay. You explained it to me. But it's very important. When you do a survey instrument, you have to describe what is the sample that I'm looking at. Because my reading hugely changes if the sample is 10 versus if the sample is 55 people responding, right? I mean, it's logical. The second thing is to answer these kind of questions. One way is to say, okay, I'll ask students what they want. The second is to say that, look, I have this nice natural experiment. There are a bunch of autonomous colleges and there are a bunch of non-autonomous colleges. What is the average percentage? You can actually look at secondary data to figure out what is the placement that, you know, what are the placement scores of autonomous versus non-autonomous colleges, for example, or what is the average percentage of, results, for example, in autonomous versus non-autonomous colleges. What kind of salary scales, for example, are offered to students who graduate from autonomous versus non-autonomous colleges. I think that would have been a fairly objective temperature taking, if I can say. One is to ask the patient, what's your temperature? The second is to actually use a thermometer, right? I'm asking you to use the thermometer. Don't ask the patient what he thinks is his temperature. Use a thermometer, see what is the outcome. Okay, so while I appreciate the hard work that has gone into the survey, I think you could have done just looked at secondary data. And on suggestions, I really like your transparency and accountability suggestion. I think bang on, so congrats on that. On projects versus tests, right? Now you said that it should be much more project-oriented assessment versus test-oriented assessment, but I wonder how does that conflict with subjectivity, right? Projects are actually gauged pretty subjectively. For example, people may not like the way the way I'm judging you versus all of you are tested on the same parameter, okay? So I kind of agree with you that maybe projects are a better way of judging people, but a little bit of caveating there would have helped. But yeah, I mean, otherwise, I think it was a good job. Great selection of topics.
Thank you. We will surely do the suggestions you gave.
Okay.
One, thank you, ma'am. Now let's move on to our next presentation. We have Dhruvi, Mehak, and Shivangi, group 2.
Can we start?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Good afternoon to one and all present here. Today, I, Shivangi, and my teammates Dhruvi and Mehak are here to talk about the US student debt crisis with a special focus on women and people of color. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah, okay. In the United States, a significant amount of the household balance sheet is covered with student debt. The expenditure of attending college is constantly rising, leading to a rise in the student loans. 2/3 of students graduate college with an average debt of more than $2,500. The reasons and their consequences differ with the demographic. While most people believe that adequate steps are taken to fight racial and gender inequality, our research suggests otherwise. 81% of Black students graduate with a debt compared to 67% white students. And surprisingly, 2/3 of the total student loan is held by women. Next slide, please. Objectives of our research paper is, with our research paper, we aim to highlight the shortcomings of the United States of America's loan sector with a special focus on women and people of color. We also strive to not only achieve a long-term solution, but to offer solutions to curb the widespread systematic injustice towards women and people of color in the education sector. Next slide. We have used secondary research in the form of recent literature to understand the problems faced by women and people of color while funding their higher education. A mix of qualitative as well as quantitative resources have been used to make the research strong. Next slide. Sorry. Over to you, Mehak.
Students of color in the United States pursue higher education in a socio-economic system built on racist ideologies, a system that is set up to work against them and perpetuate racial wealth and achievement gaps. Black families in the States have far less wealth to draw on to pay for college, creating barriers for Black communities to access higher education and build wealth. Black families are more likely to borrow more, and to have trouble at the time of repayment. The student debt crisis is just one of the latest iterations in the long and shameful history of all the unkept promises to the Black community. While students have received financial support from their families to help pay for college, Black students, more often than not, need to transfer the bulk of their post-college income to support their families. Moving on to the problems faced by women in the United States. Next slide.
So the plight of women is somewhat similar, if not worse. 2/3 of the $1.6 billion student debt is held by women. The concentration of student debt among females is a driver of the gender wealth gap amongst the debt holders. A woman only makes 81% of the income a man makes. Less income to take home makes less money to devote to loan repayment. The intersection between women and people of color reveals interesting information. A Black woman owes 20% more than a white woman of color, and the color difference bear a disproportionate debt burden. Another section of women that suffers miserably are women who are mothers. 16% of women are single mothers, and apart from the normal expenses, they have to spend $520 to provide for their child. This leaves them with no money to repay their loans. With rising education and living costs, women should be given special focus while making policies so they can benefit from them. Moving on to the next slide.
There exist 3 types of institutions in the United States: public, private non-profit, and private for-profit. While most students choose the former two, Black and Latino students choose to attend private for-profit institutions. The reason for this is that for-profit schools are more convenient for non-traditional students, including but not limited to working individuals and parents. However, as the name suggests, the institutions are for-profit and cost a king's ransom. The students have to rely heavily on loans in order to complete their education. Next slide.
The STEM versus the non-STEM courses. STEM courses includes all the science, technology, engineering, and math courses, while the non-STEM courses are related to humanities and management. Ideally, enrollment of students should be on personal choice, but in the US education system, it depends on the fees and associated with it. For instance, an engineering degree would cost $569 per credit hour awarded, while an English course would only cost $280. This makes it evident why women and people of color are underrepresented in STEM fields. They cannot afford it and are unsure if they are going to get a good paying job after getting their degree due to the racial and gender inequalities. Can we move to the next slide, please? The undergraduate versus postgraduate courses. Every year, 15% of all students in higher education are enrolled in graduate schools, and they account for 40% of overall debt. The debt system allows graduate school students to borrow an uncapped amount with an expensive interest rate and is unsustainable for all the borrowers. It affects Black students more than their white peers, which means the median debt for a Black student out of a graduate school is 50% higher than a white student's debt. It is also a matter of concern for women, considering there is a gender wage gap and a women graduate is most likely to be paid less than their male counterparts. Moving on to the next slide.
Well, forgiving student loan balances is an option. However, this will provide, at best, a weak stimulus to the economy, given the fact that savings are actually realized in relatively small amounts over time, depending on the amount a borrower pays back monthly with either full or partial forgiveness. Researchers in the United States have noted that students from high income backgrounds would benefit disproportionately from loan forgiveness under most national plans. Higher income individuals are most likely to have borrowed significant amounts to pursue graduate and professional degrees. Therefore, taking steps to reduce student debt among students of color, especially those who acquire debt while in college and never graduate, is the need of the hour. For students facing a variety of social and academic barriers, targeted policies will be needed to increase educational opportunities and improve outcomes. Unlike blanket policies, this will not benefit the privileged disproportionately. Next slide. The following points explain why some students are unable to repay their loans. The difficulty that these students face at the time of repayment is, in part, the result of their limited post-college earnings and the finite resources of their families of origin. Additionally, these students are more likely to have attended elementary and secondary schools that did not prepare them for college at all. For every 3 students of color who take out loans, 2 are unable to land a real job after leaving college. And one interesting thing that contributes to the extensive debt is financial illiteracy, as well as irresponsible spending. So the lack of awareness is also a major problem amongst most American students. Next slide.
We will talk about the existing policies that are in place to help students. One of it is Pell Grants. This is a federal grant by the United States Department of Education, which helps low-income students in the low-income category, The maximum grant given is $6,495 and is not supposed to be repaid. There are some drawbacks of this grant. The Pell Grants are not keeping up with the plummeting costs of education, which means the students still need to apply for loans even after getting a grant. The next solution in place is the income-driven repayment plans, which is an umbrella term that encompasses multiple other federal student loan repayment plans. A formula determines the monthly repayment, which is based on their income and family size. A 10-year period is given if the borrowers do not choose for a longer period. Thus, the problem with this policy would be there's an alphabet soup of too many policies under one policy, which makes it inconvenient for borrowers as well as servicers and leaves room for gigantic mistakes. Another major concern is the negative amortization. Under this scheme, the monthly repayment does not include all the accruing interest, which means with time, the borrower's loan balance significantly increases. Moving on to the next slide. We have some recommendations. No one solution could solve this problem. The growing crisis requires two sets of responses. The first one for the students with existing loan, and the second one would be putting right support in place to stop the accrual of such massive loans in the first place. The income-based return plans could all be amalgamated into one policy, and the students should understand that a safety net exists for them, and the government needs to make it so simple that they can know the benefits of it. Awareness is an issue and it should be targeted. Expansion of Pell Grants would be another solution. To keep up with the costs of education, it is imperative that the Pell Grants must be doubled. Furthermore, for instance, if 1,000 grants are given overall, they should be divided into specific sections. For instance, 30% of it could be given to women and 20% to people of color, depending on the population demographics. This is to ensure that every part of the student community receives grants equitably. The third solution to this could be the government could regulate the fees at public as well as private institutions. It could be done easily at public universities since they are already under the government's control. For private institutions, on the other hand, the government has to take up the government has set up tax exemptions and cheaper loan sub-financings. The federal government could require colleges to limit their annual tuition fee prices increases or could cut down on their benefits. Regulations to limit the cost of graduation as well as grants that would promote Black students and women in the STEM field are also a few other steps the government could take. Moving on to the next slide.
Analyzing the student debt sector opened our eyes to the injustice faced by women and people of color. Policies specifically targeting the two sectors of society should be formed and put into effect. This paper provides possible solutions to combat systematic injustice faced by the marginalized sections of the society. The issue could be solved with appropriate policy initiatives and implementations. Thank you.
If we could just move to the next slide and show the references. Yeah. And we would be open to questions now. Thank you.
Thank you, team 2. Ma'am, questions for the team?
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Shivangi, Mehak, and Ruvi for this presentation. I think it's a case that's well made out. I think it's a fantastic use of secondary resources. So great job on that. So like your presentation, like the graphics, nicely done. Okay, now the questions. All right. Why should I care about this problem? Why should the average student in India bother about the average debt with which a Black student or a Black woman student graduates in the United States? How does it make a difference to my life? How does it make a difference to your life? Aren't there enough other problems in India which you could focus your energies on?
As an Indian student who's looking to pursue her master's from an esteemed institution in the US, I think it makes a lot of sense. And it's only fair that I care about this issue because I am a woman and I happen to be a person of color. And that is what makes this issue so personal.
Mehak, I promise you, if you're able to afford a master's education in the United States, you do not deserve a grant from the United States government. Okay, guys, seriously, this magazine is called Contrarian. Okay, do not pick up stuff from the woke West and make a case and focus your energies on it. Okay, there are enough problems that I think Indian women students suffer, as you know, and you know, your energies are much better spent. You have such excellent research skills. Why don't you devote it to problems that are closer to home? I mean, the average student who goes for a master's program in the United States generally has, number one, family wealth backing or a social security net in India or loans from the State Bank of India, frankly. Okay, and I've studied in the US and I'm in Singapore, so I know this very well. Okay. So please look, your time is precious. Okay. Please do not pick up articles from New York Times and Washington Post and make it your problem. You have to get a better sense of what is India's problem. What is a problem that actually the average student in India cares about? Okay, please. But otherwise, I've got to say, I mean, a fantastic use of secondary resources. So kudos to that. The other thing I thought was, like I said, it was a case well made out. Now, I want to ask you, if you are a bank, how do you advance a loan? What do you check? If I'm a borrower and if I come to you, you guys, I think, are economic students, what will you check?
The background and the credit worthiness of the individual, if they're eligible to get a loan, is the first thing.
Right. Absolutely. So what the things that you will are likely to check, and I'm going to, sorry, I'm cutting you off because I'm worried about the time a little bit, but what will I check? I will check your income. What are your prospects of getting a job after graduating, right? What are your prospects of being able to repay your loan? Okay. And irrespective of whether you're Black or whether you are a woman, if your prospects of getting a job are good, frankly, as a bank, I'm a commercial entity. I'm bothered about loan repayment. Okay. And I will advance the loan to you. I'm really not looking at, your gender or your color. I'm literally just looking at whether you have the ability to repay. Okay. Now, your point makes sense because you will argue, but Bhargavi, most of these students actually don't have family wealth to support their repayment. In which case, should you be looking at them? To which I will say, if I don't look at your ability to repay when giving the loan, what happens to the depositors and savers who kept their money with a bank? I won't be able to repay it back to them. When you and I keep money with a Kotak Mahindra Bank and Kotak Mahindra Bank gives a loan out, he's giving my money out. When I want my money back, when I go to an ATM and withdraw that money back, and if he's not able to pay me when my card is swiped, I as a depositor lose out. Why should the bank not care about repayment prospects? So my worry with this, while it is a case that's really well made out, my worry is that it doesn't answer these questions. What is the downside for the bank? Yeah, Dhruvi, go for it.
So sorry, I think there was a communication gap or information gap. These loans are only given by the US Department of Education. They're not given by any banks. So it's essentially by the government and no private financing. If you're taking up a private financing, then they would not let you default these loans because it's the government that is giving you these loans. They're letting you default it or increasing their payment terms or giving these so many options in order for them to repay the loan. So
I thought you made a distinction between the Pell Grants, which is one thing, and then the loans, which is another thing. So you're talking about the loans also being given by the government, US government?
The loans are given by they're federal loans. They're given by the US Department of Education. So they are not given by a private financing bank or anybody else. So
in that case, I would say, why shouldn't the taxpayer be bothered about how this money is being used?
That is one of the concerns. This problem is so huge because this money is going, they're defaulting on these loans for so long that it's wasting out on taxpayers' money. We are coming up with solutions that could save on taxpayers' money and also effectively help the students in the process.
Okay, so your solution, so the way you're trying to solve this problem is say that we'll regulate fees charged by private institutions as well as public institutions. Okay. What happens when you cap fees? Economic students, tell me, what happens to the supply side when you cap fees?
They will stop supplying. Like the institutions would stop they'll stop giving out too many courses or asking for too many students. Right now, their acceptance rate is too much, but they'll stop accepting students if they have to cap.
In fact, there will be an explicit bias against students from the marginalized communities because you know that actually the government is in favor of capping fees for these kind of students, and therefore, you know what, I'll just not take them in. Then you'll say, no, but you must have a quota for taking such students. You see where this is going? It's becoming a bit of a loop. Okay. The other thing is, please, I mean, fundas of economics, more competition brings down costs. You don't want to restrict the supply side. Okay, because our only hope in hell out of this situation is that if we have more private institutions, like the previous presentation mentioned, if we have more autonomous institutions, actually, we will be able to bring down costs, and that in fact may help students. Okay, so be careful when you suggest solutions that are only looking at one side of the problem. I think it could have been, you could have done a little more work on making it two-sided. And of course, whenever you pick up a problem that you want to spend time on, please ask yourself, why should I care? Okay. All right. Otherwise, love the presentation and the graphics and secondary use of data. Very nicely done. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Group 2. We now have our last presentation for the day by Rachel, Soumya, and Ajay. Over to you guys.
Good morning to one and all present here. Our topic for today is impact of Chernobyl on the economy and repercussions on the policies made thereafter the incident. And so first of all, you should know what is Chernobyl gas tragedy and a little background. So the Chernobyl tragedy happened on 26 April 1986, which is due to a faulty reactor design that was operated by the night shift employees who were not suitably qualified. The steam explosion and flames that followed discharged at least 5% of the radioactive reactor core into the environment, resulting in radioactive elements being dispersed in different parts of Europe. 2 Chernobyl plant workers died in the explosion on the night of the tragedy, and then another 28 people suffered from acute radiation within a few weeks. The wind carried radiation over Belarus, Russia, and Ukraine, eventually reaching France and Italy. Hundreds of thousands of people remained in toxic areas, despite the fact that millions of acres of forest and farmland had been damaged. The research methodology used for this paper is based on secondary data from credible sources. The secondary data will be used on some published articles, books, and research papers that have already analyzed this incident on similar lines. The limitations of the paper are, firstly, we relied entirely on secondary research, and secondly, the lack of qualitative research literature on policies made post-Chernobyl might affect the paper.
Next slide, please. Yeah, next slide. Post this gas tragedy, everybody realized that nuclear safety is also a global issue and something to work on. Even before this, the International Atomic Energy Agency, also known as IAEA, tried to frame some multilateral agreements on international cooperation during nuclear accidents after the 3 Mile Island accident in USA in the year 1979. But nobody really cared about it. Just after 4 months after the Chernobyl incident, the Convention on Early Notification of Nuclear Accidents was successfully negotiated in Vienna. According to the report presented by Mr. Valery Legislaw, the RBMK reactors which were being used were found dangerous and faulty. They were banned outside the Soviet Union also. The report further stated that the USSR prevented the nuclear plant operators from knowing that the previous accident with the RBMK reactors. There was absolutely no transparency, and even after the accident, the government was trying to show that it was nothing major but a very small incident. The USSR was trying to lessen the scale of the gas tragedy globally. The convention concluded that from now on, it would be compulsory for the state to report the time, nature, location, and other essential information about a nuclear accident to IAEA. Basically, we can say a notification system for the nuclear accident was established. Next slide, please. If we go a little back, then in 1960, Paris Convention on Third-Party Liability in the field of nuclear energy was signed, according to which adequate compensation would be provided to public for damage caused by nuclear accidents, while also ensuring that the nuclear industry growth would not be disturbed. Unfortunately, USSR was not a part of this, and thus the victims of the disaster did not receive much compensation. If they would have agreed to this convention in 1960, then probably they would have been entitled to a big amount of compensation. Next slide. revision of Paris Convention on third-party liability in the field of nuclear energy, and the Brussels Supplementary Convention to the Paris Convention. It was amended. So basically, it was amended in two parts. First, in 1997 and 2004. The prior standards for defining the term nuclear accident were relaxed. It will now cover a number of additional situations and areas, such as contracting parties' territory, marine zones, and onboard ships and aircraft, which was a great step to ensure more safety and development at the same time. If a state is a party to the Vienna Convention and the Joint Protocol, the convention will apply to a nuclear damage that has occurred in non-contracting states. The amount of compensation given to victims of this nuclear accident under the amended protocol has been raised from 300 million euros to 1.5 billion euros. All the convention took place to ensure that the global growth in terms of nuclear energy, and at the same time to keep in mind the welfare of the country and its citizens in which the growth is being done. But despite the incentives made available in most conventions regarding nuclear liability, the majority of nuclear powered producing countries like India and China are not a member of any of them. Next slide.
The economic impact. The Chernobyl incident that occurred in the former Ukrainian Republic of the Soviet Union on 26 April had tremendous impact on mankind and the ecosystem. The catastrophic incident had resulted in extensive damage to the financial system. Various emergency planning had been considered by the authorities to combat the situation. The government policies implemented to cope up with this disaster imposed a huge amount of cost on the Soviet Union, and the major countries were Ukraine, Belarus, and the Russian Federation. Moving on to the next slide. The value of the Chernobyl nuclear accident can only be calculated with high level of estimation, considering the non-market condition given in that time, the high inflation rate, and unsustainable transaction period that altogether brought up the breakup of the Soviet Union in 1991. The Chernobyl incident demonstrated the weakness in the emergency planning and disaster response that could be repeated in the downstream in the future. Now, the scale of the burden can be demonstrated into two methods, the direct method and the indirect method. Now, the direct method, the disaster loss is determined by damage to natural resources, infrastructure, monetary value, market value of fixed asset. The direct loss on the fixed asset and the material goods, together with the action to deal with the situation, amounted to 900 million rubles. The indirect loss associated with the opportunity cost of refraining the agricultural land and forest from use. The aggregate income and the expenditure were on the construction of the new houses, healthcare facilities, resettlement services provided to accommodate people affected by the nuclear explosion, provisions to protect the environment, which cost them around 2.94 billion rubles. The compensation and the payment on the cash benefits were provided to the people for the reconstruction of the forest and agriculture products. Moving on to the next slide. The Chernobyl Shelter Fund policy for the reconstruction and the development managed by the European Bank is expected to cost more than $2 billion. The fund was erected in 1997 to assist those most stricken by the disaster. The countries were mainly Ukraine, Belarus, and the Russia. The funding had been managed through the contribution done by the 40 countries. The major countries were Australia, Argentina, India, Israel, Korea, and Turkey. The disaster is estimated to cost more than $235 billion. Belarus has spent 22% of the aggregate budget to overcome these consequences. The total spending of the Belarus is more than $13 billion. The Ukraine has spent 5 to 7% of their government savings for this cause. This massive expenditure has generated unsustainable fiscal budget. Moving on to the next slide.
Effects of the gas tragedy. The ionizing radiation is an established cause of certain cancers and solid cancers, and there were confirmed deaths from cancer, namely thyroid cancer. And ingestion of food contaminated with radioactive iodine did result in significant doses to the thyroid of inhabitants of the contaminated areas of Belarus, Russia, and Ukraine. Also, the people affected by the gas tragedy developed an increased risk of cardiovascular diseases and cataract. Next slide, please. The reallocation of people. To reduce the impact of radiation, reallocation policy was adopted. But it was deeply traumatic for the majority of them. It affected the mental health and physical health. Even when the population was compensated for the losses, given free housing and a choice of resettlement area, many people felt the process was unfair because in reality, the promises were never fulfilled. Many wished to return to their native places. The people were traumatized by the rapid relocation, the breakdown in social contacts, fear, and anxiety about what health effects might result. Most of the residents of Chernobyl and nearby Pripyat were evacuated to the provinces around Kiev and Zhytomyr in Ukraine. Also, the residents face mental health issues. You would be surprised to know the psychological consequences found in Chernobyl exposed populations are similar to those in atomic bombing survivors. In addition, individuals in the affected populations were officially categorized as sufferers and came to be famously known as Chernobyl victims. Instead of calling them survivors, they have been looked down upon and stereotyped to be helpless. According to us, they are heroes who lived through the worst gas tragedy. Next slide, please. Agriculture sector was most affected. Now, the Chernobyl disaster did serious damage to agriculture and forestry. The agriculture sector, which was the most important sector, collapsed due to the radiation. Thousands of acres of forest and farmland were damaged. Livestock was born with deformity. About 1.3 million hectares of agriculture land was subjected to radioactive contamination. The main tasks of agro-industry and forestry in the initial period after the Chernobyl disaster were to protect agro-industrial and forestry workers against radiation and to organize and implement a system of measures to prevent food products from contaminating. In USSR, agriculture was done mainly in two forms. First was large collective farms, which provided them wages and social benefits. And another one was small individual plots, which were used for household consumption and local sale. The policies which were introduced by the government aimed at protecting the masses from radiation exposure impacted the rural economy in a negative manner, as the policy was practiced both through resettlement and through limitations on agricultural production. Next slide.
So we all know that it was very difficult for the USSR to deal with such a big tragedy. And be it any other country, it would not have been easy. So there are some certain suggestions we have come up with. So first of all, a proper system of proper communication protocol should have been established with engaging the stakeholders in decision making. They should have ensured ensured proper accurate sharing of reliable and accurate information, which would help the citizens in not panicking. Second of all, the evacuation orders should have been lifted as soon as possible to minimize the effect. The agriculture sector, as explained by Ajay, was the most affected. So the policymakers should have focus on some policies related to agriculture. For example, while reallocating, they should have kept in mind to give some land to the localites who were dependent on agriculture so that their livelihood would not have been hampered. Next slide.
So even before the Chernobyl tragedy happened, the International Atomic Energy Agency tried to make some policies and laws on international cooperation in case of a nuclear accident. However, it was not given much importance. Post Chernobyl, the world saw the effects of nuclear tragedy, which resulted in various conventions and amendments in already existing policies, as told by Soumya. This tragedy resulted in heavy economic loss for the USSR. The government policies implemented to cope with the disaster imposed a huge amount of cost on the Soviet Union as well, as told by Rachel. We came to know that the policies introduced by the government imposed a huge cost on the country, which affected their growth and destroyed their local economy. In the end, we conclude that even after introducing the policies, USSR was not able to handle this properly. one can say that they were working two-phase because on the grassroots level, they were functioning differently, but to the world, they were showing something totally different. Thank you.
Thank you, team. Ma'am, question for team.
Yeah. Hi, Ajay, Soumya, Rachel. Thanks for your presentation. Great graphics. Very interesting story. I've got to say, you've taken a very hard task of measuring the cost of the Chernobyl disaster. It's not easy to do this, right? But primarily because how much of the loss, for example, you mentioned inflation, how much of it is attributable to the disaster versus during that time, actually half the world was undergoing huge inflation, right? So how much of it can be attributed? So as you know, in economics, isolating the effect and establishing causality is very hard. So which is why it's a hard task. So, but I have the same question for you as for the previous team. What made you pick this topic? Why should, in this information bombardment from, why should I actually bother listening to what happened in Chernobyl?
Should I take the question, team? Okay. Why is it important? Yeah, that's a good question. Even we ask ourselves the same thing. There have been several tragedies, even in India, the Bhopal gas tragedy. And the thing is, we are not learning from these past incidents. And that was our main focus, that, government does make mistakes because that's the first time. But you can learn from the past experiences. And that's why we highlighted Chernobyl, because it was the worst gas tragedy. And I think everyone should learn from it. And the conventions which came after it, that was a good step.
Understood. So I think it's a good answer. It's a good point. So let me ask you, Ajay, what is the one remarkable difference between the Bhopal gas tragedy and the Chernobyl disaster? I mean, apart from the fact that one is nuclear and the other is not a nuclear leak, what is the one remarkable difference in its management, the way the tragedy was managed? You meant actually you covered it in your paper. You covered
it's really
it in
hard
your paper.
What the difference? There are so many similarities actually between them.
Okay, yeah. Tell me, what are the similarities?
Because in both ways, the authorities were at fault. Even in Bhopal gas tragedy, it was to come because the tanks were overfilled. There was no empty tank. The pipelines were not properly maintained. There was no evacuation plan. There were no emergency alarms in the area.
So in one case, would you say that the plant was run by a government, a state agency? Yeah, and in our case, I mean, in the Bhopal gas tragedy case, it was by Union Carbide, which is not a government-owned agency.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Cardinal difference, right?
Yeah.
What happens when something goes wrong at a government-owned plant versus when something goes wrong at a privately owned plant? What happens? How do you think the management works out? You mentioned it. This Soviets, in terms of information dissemination, they were really poor, right? They did not disclose accurate information on a timely basis. Of course, the scale of the tragedy between Bhopal and Chernobyl cannot be compared. It's very different. But when it's a government-owned plant, what happens is the government really controls the information machine, right? And that makes it very hard. In fact, in any government, in any economy where there is an authoritarian government, anything that goes wrong, as you know, the information machine is controlled by the government. So it's harder. I like your suggestions on communication protocols, accurate sharing of information, all make a lot of sense to me. I would have really liked it if you, in your essay, you would have had a conclusion section that what are the lessons to be learned from the Chernobyl disaster for India or for similar, because I mean, I know that you said that, there were treaties mentioned, entered into, etc. But I mean, I still couldn't see the exact relevance of it from I mean, we all have so many sources of information constantly being thrown at us. Why should I spend 10 minutes of the day reading about a disaster happening in a remote country in the 90s, which is now mostly done and dusted with? Like you said, treaties have been entered into subsequently, etc. So yeah, that's my single sort of biggest tip to anybody who is interested in policy research. If you pick a policy to study, it's a good thing. But you must ask yourself, why should anybody, other than you, who's obviously curious about it, why should anybody spend time reading about it, right? How will it make a difference to their lives? So setting up the motivation for picking up a particular policy to research is extremely important. So try to make sure you do that. Also, causality. I mean, you have to focus on the causality. If you're setting up the challenge that I'm going to measure the impact of this, in advance, ask yourself, there may be 10 effects of this. How am I going to isolate the effect of everything else in response to this? So for example, if there was inflation, or if the economic situation deteriorated in Ukraine or Russia or Belarus after the disaster, how do you know that it wouldn't have happened if the disaster wouldn't have occurred? What if even in Kazakhstan and the surrounding countries, the economic situation had also deteriorated? How do you isolate the effect of the incident? That's your single biggest challenge as an economist. How do you establish causality? Okay, so think about it on those lines. But again, great graphics. I think there is obviously a lesson from the Chernobyl disaster. I like the way you answered the question. You were really positive. So good. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. We'll keep all of this in mind next time. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Okay. Yeah, I think we're done now.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, team. Thank you, ma'am. I would really like to request you to say a few words about all the presentations and your experience today.
Oh, so I think I already said too much to each team. So, I mean, I'm sorry, but please take it in the right spirit. I think first of all, it's great that you're participating in writing, in picking up policy research at such an early stage of your life. Frankly, I did not pick up policy until late 20s, and I kind of regret it. I wish I was more conscious, more aware in my junior college days. So congratulations. The fact that you have this enthusiasm by itself is very promising. So that's great. I would say the topics were good. Okay, I'm not saying that the topics were bad, but you have to follow a structure. Number one, why should somebody be interested in this problem? Number two, what is the problem that is attempted to be solved? Number three, how will you choose? So I think a little bit of polishing on that front, and I'm sure you all will make good policy researchers.
Thank you, ma'am. We have a Professor Firdaus ma'am with us. Ma'am, would you like to say a few words?
Hello, first and foremost, a very good evening to all of you. And I really appreciate the research that is done by each and every participant, commendable in the midst of so many things that you all are doing in college, to write research papers, to present it so confidently in front of, you could say, esteemed judge, and, in front of the large number of students. So really huge round of applause to all of you, and also to Eco Association and Contrarian for regularly providing us so enriching experience of so thoroughly assessed research papers. So thanks a lot to the team for always putting up a fabulous show. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I would officially like to give the vote of thanks. So thank you, Bhargavi ma'am, for taking out time and gracing the event and putting out such good suggestions to the students. It was really insightful for all of us to even hear it and learn so much from you. So thank you so much. Thank you all the teachers and all the participants and attendees for staying with us for the competition. I would now like to hand it over to Sehaj for our next event. And participants to please note that the results will be announced at the closing ceremony on day 2. Thank you for joining us, ma'am. Bye-bye.
Wait, Gorangi, can we have a 2-minute break and start exactly at 4?
Yeah.
There is no feedback form or anything like that.
We would be sharing that at the end of the course.
Okay, so so when do we have to join again?
You can continue in this meeting. We'll start exactly at 4. So
Okay.
after a minute.
Okay, thank you.
Hi everyone, we are just waiting for a few more people to join in and we'll shortly begin.
Guys, we'll be starting in 2 to 3 minutes. Guys, Sarita ma'am, the head of economics department is here in the meeting. Would like to welcome you, ma'am. Today.
Sahaj, your mic is off.
I request all the participants to switch on your cameras. Aryan, Bhushan, Aryan Kasitya, Pooja, Shrishti, Radhika, Aman, Amatya, Yash, Siddiq, Naitik. So we'll start now. A very good evening to everyone present here. Today, I, Sahaj,
and I, Anushna,
extend a warm welcome to the second event of the day, Guesstimate. The event aims to amalgamate general knowledge and awareness with a fun learning experience. Amidst the 2 busy days of the annual economic symposium, it will test the participants' knowledge of corporate companies and provide a deep understanding about the real meaning behind their logos and objectives. The event will consist of 2 rounds. Participants will have to qualify round 1 in order to move ahead to round 2.
Before we start, I'd like to request the participants to follow the code of conduct. Participants must ensure that camera is on at all times and the mic must only be unmuted when it is their chance to speak. While answering during the competition, both the participants' hands must be raised up on camera to ensure no unfair means are being used. Participants must join from their laptop and show their mobile phones before their chance and keep it aside on camera. We request participants from indulging in any unfair means. We also urge the audience to avoid any means of cheating. Points will be deducted on the discretion of organizers for exceeding the above mentioned time limit using unfair means, etc.
Okay, so now if everyone is ready, should I start explaining round 1? I again request all of you to kindly switch on your cameras, as it's one of the code of conduct that you guys have to follow. Naitik, did we? Yeah, so they say. Pooja. Yes. Pooja, but you will have to switch on your camera. Priya, could you please coordinate with Pooja and help her out with that? Is there anyone who has not switched on your camera?
Pooja, we will request you to join in again. Till that time, Sahaj, you can continue with the round 1.
So now I will start explaining round 1. Anusha, please let me screen share. Yeah. Let's now begin with the round 1 of guesstimate. Bringing logic and knowledge together, let's get dazzled with the puzzle. In this event, participants will be required to strategically use their game points to crack the puzzle to qualify for the next round. Now the puzzles will be scattered pieces of company logos and you will be provided those pieces through a Canva link. Every participant will have 45 seconds to crack that puzzle. And you will have to take minimum 3 pieces of that puzzle. And if you take more additional pieces, your points will be deducted. I will be explaining that in detail with one sample. Also, each participant is required to crack 2 puzzles in round 1, and the points will be added for both. Now, let me explain you the proper thing by a sample. One second. So in this event, each of you will be given a Canva link in which you will have these blocks. So can you guess which company logo is this just by looking at this right now? Can one of you just guess it? It's catered pieces. These are 9 pieces. Anyone? Core? Anyone? Do you want to guess?
I think if someone from the audience is able to guess.
It's a bank.
An academy?
No. It's a bank, not an Indian bank. Very famous one.
Standard Chartered.
Yeah, great. So now these are 9 blocks. Out of these 9 blocks, you will have to take minimum 3 blocks for guessing the logo, but 3 is minimum. Now, out of 90 points, let's say there are 90 points for each of these blocks, 30 would be deducted for all the participants. Now, if you say I want 5 blocks and I will be able to guess the entire logo, it will be scattered pieces. I will give you the Canva link. You can join it or rotate it or make it size bigger or smaller. You can do it by yourself. That's not an issue. But you have to like arrange the puzzle and guess the logo. That's the thing in 45 seconds. Now, if you say I want to take 5 pieces, your 50 points will be deducted from the first 90 points that are there. Now, if you lesser the number of blocks, lesser points will be deducted. But mind that you will have to take 3 blocks at least. After that, as you have 45 seconds to guess, if you guess the logo in the first 20 seconds, you will get 150 points. If you guess the logo from 20 to 30 seconds, you will get 120 points. And if you guess the logo after 30 seconds, you will get 100 points. So now it's up to you whether you want to take more blocks or guess it earlier and get more points there. So it's a trade-off that you will have to think and play it accordingly. Everyone will be given 2 chances, like they will be given 2 blocks or 2 logos to guess. Is everything clear in the sort? Like, also, if there are 3 blocks, let's say I have 9 blocks right now, I will remove 3 blocks right now. So now I have 6 blocks. So you can even make it size bigger, smaller, rotate it, whatever you want. You just have to arrange it in a proper way. You will tell me how many blocks do you want. I will give you the number of blocks accordingly, and then you have to arrange it and tell me the company logo. What is it in 45 seconds, and the time ratio I have told you guys. Do you have any doubts in this part? Anyone? All clear? If
do we have to unmute and guess, or do I have to put it in the chat box?
Yeah, so you will be, first of all, you will screen share your entire screen. Then I will share a Canva link in the Zoom chat, private Zoom chat, just to you. After you screen share, then only I will share. Until unless you are not screen sharing, I will not be able to share the link. You will click on that link and you will be on unmute and your camera will be on while guessing the logo. So now it's up to you how many blocks you want and when do you want to guess it. So if you take more blocks, maybe there are higher chances that you will be able to guess it early. And if you, let's take one more example. If you take 7 blocks, you will only get 20 points there. And then it depends upon you how you are able to guess the logo. You will get the points there. Got it? Has everyone joined in from their laptop here? All the participants. Is there anyone who has joined in from his phone or iPad? Guys, is there anyone?
Yeah, I've joined from my phone, but like I'm just joining from my laptop in just a
minute.
minute.
Sure. 1 second. Yeah, you can join in 5 minutes from your laptop. That's fine. So is everyone clear? Just show me a thumbs up if you are all clear and we are good to go. All the participants, please switch on your camera. You are not allowed to switch it off anytime. Siddiq, Bhushan, Aman. Are you guys fine with the rules? Is there any doubt? Please let me know. Okay, cool. Then we'll start with the first participant. 1 second. First participant is Aryan. Aryan, we'll start with you. How many number of blocks do you want?
5.
5. Okay. Give me a second. Till then, you can start the screen share. Anushna, please check if it's sharing his entire screen properly. I will be sharing you the Canva link within 1 minute on your Zoom chat. And I've sent you the link. Can anyone of you please highlight Aryan? Oh, sorry, spotlight Aryan. You have 45 seconds. Your time starts now.
Fast.
You have 15 more seconds.
I would
Like,
take pass.
you can't pass. Like you can guess as many as. So
Okay.
you can't pass it. Your time's up. Time is up. You will only get 40 points for selecting the number of blocks. If you want to give a wild guess, what it would be? What do you think? You can guess it any number of time to all the other participants. There's no restriction on number of times you can guess. It's a financial company. It also owns some of the mutual funds. Any idea?
No.
Anyone from the audience? Any idea?
IFL Securities.
Yeah, correct. Moving on, we'll go to the next participant and we'll come back to you, Aryan, on the second one. You can stop sharing. The next participant is Bhushan. Bhushan, could you please switch on your camera and tell me the number of blocks that you want? Is Bhushan here? Bhushan is not there in the meeting. So we'll move on with Aryan. Aryan, please, could you please switch on your camera and tell me the number of slides that you want? Aryan, press it. Aryan.
Yes, yes. Actually, I have DM you on WhatsApp. Can you please check it for once? Like,
Yeah, could you please start sharing your screen now? Okay, you can take 5 minutes. We'll move on with the next participant then. Pooja, are you ready?
Yes, but I'm doing it from my phone. I don't have the laptop with me currently.
You don't have a laptop at all.
Yeah, because I'm out right now, so it's really not possible.
Okay, so will you be able to guess it from your phone?
Yeah,
You
I will
can.
be able to get it from my mobile.
You have a Canva app, or
Yeah, I do have Canva.
tell me the number of blocks that you want, and you can start sharing your mobile screen.
Okay, I want 3 blocks for now.
No, you can't get more number of blocks later
Okay,
on.
so
So
okay, so 2 blocks.
3 is minimum. 3 is
Okay,
minimum. You have to take more than 3, and you can't increase the number of blocks later on. So whatever number of blocks that you choose, that will be the final number of blocks that you'll be getting in the puzzle.
okay, okay. So I would like to go with
It's
7
out of
blocks.
9. It's out of
7,
9.
7. Okay,
7.
7.
1 second. Till then, you can start sharing, and Anushka, you can please check.
Just give me a minute.
Can you start sharing?
Your screen still isn't visible. Pooja, her screen is still not visible.
Is it visible now?
No, I
Uh,
can see you,
yeah.
but the screen is not visible.
Listen, if you can't
I've turned
screen
on
share, then
screen
I will
share.
screen. Then I can also screen share it for you, and you can tell me that which block do you want to move and how.
Yeah, that would be really helpful because I've turned on my screen sharing. I don't know what's the problem.
Okay. I
Yeah.
will screen. I'm screen sharing it for you. There are 7 blocks,
Yeah.
and can you see the blocks?
Yeah, I can.
Your time starts now.
Okay, so there's this block, the one that is there in the bottom middle.
Yeah.
Yeah, excluding that, as well as the one that is there towards the extreme right of the slide. Yeah, excluding these two, I want the other block.
You have to guess the company logo out of this. You
Okay,
have to
okay,
arrange them in some or the other way, and you have to guess the company logo.
okay.
Try to find a pattern. You have 5 more seconds.
Okay. Listen, I just recollected. It's HSBC.
Correct. So you'll get 90 points because you were just on time. So your 10 points will be deducted. And
All right.
from out
Thank
of 90,
you.
you'll get 20. So yeah.
All right. Yeah. Thank you.
Our next participant will be Shishti. Shishti, if you could tell me the number of blocks that you want, and you can start sharing your entire screen. Shishti. Hello. If you're on mute, you have to tell me the number of blocks that you want.
5.
5. Okay. And you can start sharing. I will send a.
Yeah.